Hey, how's it going? You already know who it is. It's Key, aka Primitive, aka Mater Development, aka the man with many, many different names, apparently. And I'm here for a stream. I want to try something different today. Look at the camera, first of all. I'm going to be doing a stream where I start to answer questions. This is going to be a whole series. And the first one here is going to be noob advice for developers. And I'm going to circle back with you with plenty more videos just like this. So if you want to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that like, comment, subscribe, follow button, whatever the things that people say to do on a YouTube channel that you like, go ahead and do that for me down below, okay? That's all I'm gonna say about that stuff. Go ahead and do that, okay? Anyways, we got some Q&A today. I got 5 questions that I'm going to be answering basically from my perspective as a professional. If you've been to my channel before, you know that I rarely get on here and do a whole like dissertation about things. I'm going to try to change that. I think I have a lot to offer. I think I have a lot to share as an experienced professional. And I'll get into that stuff a little bit more later so that you can get to know me a little bit better. But we're going to jump right into these questions. We're going to dive right on in. And we're going to do it. This is the first of this series, and I'm sure that things will continue to go up from here, okay? So the first question I want to talk about today is, how do you stand out in a sea of new developers? Now, this is a question that I've gotten from a lot of my students as a boot camp teacher for a long time. And this is a question that I had when I was getting into software development. And then this question is really important for people who are coming into this space of technology, maybe as an outsider, or maybe this is your second or your third career change, and you need some perspective on how to stand out. So I would say that I have 2 pieces of advice. There's really 2 things that I think make a big difference when you're stepping into a technology career, or really any career, to be honest. As a noob. The first one is contributing to something bigger than yourself. A lot of the software development culture and community is based in the ethos and the practice of open source software. If you look into the history of computer science, the history of technology making, especially in the Americas, a lot of what we do and benefit from comes from this open source community. And not only that, but by contributing to that open source community, you can make a lot of good connections, but also participate in the what I consider the core of the culture that enables so much of what we do when we make software and build things, okay? So if you were to go to the internet right now on your computer, you could go to any of these like major open source projects like React, for any of the front end frameworks really. You could go to any of the projects for like tools that are used for JavaScript like Express and Node, all those things. They may not all truly be open source in like the literal sense, but many of them have open communities where you can go and contribute. You can make a pull request. You can participate in bug hunts and stuff like that. And so I would say that that's a great way to stand out, because if you get that experience of working on a really large public project, you're going to have a lot of extra knowledge for things that become really important when you have your first job working at like a larger company or at any company that's making production grade software. So what I noticed is that when people come from a boot camp or from college or are self-learners, they may know how to do things like build features. They may know the literal syntax of a specific programming language, but there's a lot of other things like developer operations, testing, linting, infrastructure, deployment, pipelines. There's a lot of other things like that that become really important, and they're really hard to become good at on your own, because those are problems that come up and the solutions of which are designed to work in the context of bigger teams, bigger efforts, and more complex projects and problems. So when you start working on a bigger thing than maybe you can make as an individual, you get a chance to work on some of these other types of areas of software engineering and development that you may not get a chance to do so easily or so quickly when you're working on your own independent project. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I would say build side projects. And in my notes here, it says unique. It doesn't need to be like the world's most like innovative thing. I would say make something that really reflects thoughtfulness, you know? So it's especially nowadays where people can like use AI and like all these other things to make really generic projects really quickly. It becomes a very meaningless thing to make something glib, right? I was gonna say stupid, but that's very strong. It'd be kind of a meaningless gesture to have a portfolio full of like these very glib, generic projects. What I would say is make something that you really get excited about, because that energy that you walk into a room with when you start talking about your project, or when you start answering questions to an interviewer about what you created, that energy is going to be really powerful, and it's going to translate and sell you as someone who's really passionate. And when you're showing projects to people and you're showing your portfolio to people, you want to do a lot more than just be like, I made a thing. You want to be able to walk into a room and be able to get people really into that energy space of you being excited, interested, engaged. This is an idea that you really, really think is valuable. Think about it like this. When you make a project, the whole point of coding and making software and applications isn't to make them, it's to produce some type of value, right? And if you can walk into a meeting with a project that you really believe has value, maybe it's created value for you, for someone you know, or maybe it's solving a problem that people can relate to, something that's unique that hasn't been addressed, something that a solution to a problem that maybe comes from your own experiences and observations in the world. That's a seller. That's a game changer. That's something that makes you an easy sell, because it's not enough to just be able to code. Coding has to do something that moves people, that creates a call to action, that enables a transaction, that optimizes a process, that enables a person to do something that they couldn't have done before, or maybe more easily. Coding has to do a lot more than just exist. So those side projects that you work on, they don't have to be like the most game-changing things in the world, but at least try to do something that feels like unique. Do some research, things like that, okay? I'm gonna put in my extra notes up here. When you work on side projects, or any projects really, try to work on things that you believe in. And when I say that, I would say like things you believe will create some impact, even if it is small, okay? Doesn't need to be the biggest game changer in the world, just something you can speak to. Keep it simple, keep it concise. I would even say when you're starting out, maybe in fact focus on those really, really small projects at first. Maybe focus on the things that are really, really simple to do, that are still meaningful, and then work your way up to like maybe bigger, more exciting, more challenging things. But no matter what you do, make it something that you can really speak to, okay? Talking in circles, I think you get the point. Okay, so the next one here, this is what to not do. Do not try to blend in, okay? Now, this is not just a matter of like your coding and the projects you choose to do, just in general, okay? I've interviewed people for jobs. I've sat on panels to review people who are being interviewed. I've never been like a director or anything like that, but I've definitely been a part of the process on the other side. One thing I'll say is that if you're a great developer, but you don't stand out against like the 10 other developers, you might still get the job or the opportunity or whatever you're looking for, but your chances are not going to be as distinct, okay? And it's also going to be really, really hard for you to know how and where to sell yourself in order to improve your odds. The thing about it is like, it is important to network actively, but you do not need to blend in order to do that successfully. And a lot of people will even suggest that having a distinct brand, having a distinct energy that comes from a place of authenticity is going to get you a lot more further or along than just trying to be like, a clone of whatever you think the perfect developer is going to be. Okay. Um, your diversity, your uniqueness, your difference, that is your brand, and your brand is the most compelling part of you, or at least it should be. Okay, so try to distinguish yourself, network a lot. Don't just be sitting up at your house doing a bunch of code in a dark room, with a bunch of Mountain Dew cans everywhere and the lights off in the basement or whatever. You don't do that. Okay, don't do that to yourself. Coding should be thought of as a collective response to problems that can be solved inside of a computer in general. Like when you're making bigger software, especially, like this is a bunch of people who come together, who work together in a social context in order to solve a big problem that oftentimes has a lot of abstract aspects to it. Okay. But at the core of all of that, what makes all of that work is people. Okay. And if you go out and meet people, then those people might be like, hey, come join our team, be on our crew, be in our party, come explore this dungeon with us. And the networking was really what I'm trying to say is like a huge part of all of that. Okay. So if you can get out there, work on your social skills, work on your relationship building skills, actually invest in relationships. Don't just do it for the job, but real relationships. They always will matter in the world. Okay. The most important thing out of all of this, though, I would say, is that no matter what you do, you need to have the work that supports and illustrates and demonstrates and shows that you can do the thing that you want to do professionally, at least in some capacity. Okay, so don't wait to get the job to do the stuff that you're interested in. Start working on it. Doesn't need to be your own project. It can be open source, or it can be something that you came up with yourself. Either way is fine, but you need to do all of that and then be able to show it to people who matter, to people who are interested, to people who are in your field of view or whatever. So the combination of all of that together, I think, will make you stand out. Okay, so hopefully that solves that. Whew. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so imposter syndrome. Now, everybody has a different struggle. I've met people who don't have imposter syndrome at all. Okay, you might be asking, what's imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people feel, and what it often can feel like is, I don't belong here. I'm not good enough. Some people even may have the feeling that one day their boss or their employee and their employer or their peers may wake up one day and realize that they're a big fraud. Even people who are very, very successful, who may even have jobs as engineers or whatnot, may have that feeling occasionally as well. I've heard from people who are like senior developers, engineers. I've even heard from people who are like directors and C-suite board members who will say that they have occasional feelings like they're a fraud, like they don't belong, like they don't really know what they're doing, like they're just kind of keeping it together day by day, but just hanging by a thread. Okay, that feeling, whatever that is, you cannot let that become the master of you, and you have to stay ahead of it, and you have to be proactive. The way that I handle this is I handle this by trying to remember just a very simple set of truths. Okay, now these truths will not save you if you are ill prepared and you do not put forth the actual effort of being studious and showing up. But if you are doing all of that, then here's what I will remember. Everybody starts somewhere, okay? Now, there is no finish line. There is no end state to learning, to being an engineer. You just happen to make your way further down the path. But no matter how far you get, you're always going to feel like a beginner in some sense. Okay, you might think you know things one day, and the next day, it's like, oh, there's a whole new side to this that I don't understand. Everybody starts somewhere, and that is okay. Nobody is paying you to be like the master. Nobody's paying you to be like the most amazing person in the world. And it's also impossible to be everything all at once. especially when you're doing a career where there's just so much that could never fit into one person's mind. Okay, even for your job, you're going to always be depending on things that come from other people. You're always going to need to get help, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody always starts somewhere. It's okay. Beginner's mindset is actually a good thing. And just basically accepting that removes a lot of the friction and a lot of the paralysis. Okay, so everybody starts somewhere. Just say it 10 times in the mirror if you need to. Okay, number two is your unique perspective is valuable. Okay, a lot of what makes you useful and valuable is the fact that you might not be an expert if you think about it. Okay, so here's a scenario. Let's say that I'm trying to find some talent for a team of people who are meant to do some innovation. Maybe this innovation is happening in the AI space. Maybe the innovation is happening in the IoT space. It doesn't really matter. Okay. Believe it or not, what I might be looking for is someone who has a balance of the ability to learn quickly and to be competent, at least in like self-knowledge for how they like to learn and how they can learn, right? Like maybe not knowing the specifics of the technology itself in detail, but you know yourself really well, and you know how to get yourself to learn things. You know how to study. Okay, that's one thing I might want. But what I also might want when I'm working with talent, especially newer talent, is I might want someone who can think subversively and creatively, and I would say the word obliquely about how to solve problems, different approaches to things, and different types of solutions. A lot of times we need those people who can think outside the box. And what you might feel as imposter syndrome might be a very, very, very valuable frame of reference, right? Here's an example. A lot of times when people have a lot of experience, a lot of years behind them, they get stuck in certain ways and they don't realize it, but they may be looking at the world through a very particular lens that is hard for them to even recognize, right? But here comes this new person who doesn't quite know all the rules and all the constraints and everything, and all of a sudden they're asking questions that others may not have asked. They may be able to see things from a perspective that others are not as flexible to be able to see and to be able to to even conceptualize, right? They may be asking sort of questions that might come from a place of naivete, but may reveal problems in how the solution was thought of before. It might challenge or reveal erroneous thinking. Sometimes people who are very new to something, just like children, for example, ask questions that make you think, oh, I never thought of it that way. They'll sort of be like oppositional and subversive intellectually, or maybe even in just their pure innocence, they may stumble across something that we didn't see because we thought we knew. We thought we knew the truth, or we thought we knew the answer. So that can be a good thing. It doesn't get you everything and everywhere you want to go in life, but it's very useful to try to at least embrace that while you have it, because it is valuable. And when people are hiring you, they know that you're not like an expert, okay? They know that you're not going to see things the way they see them, and that the diversity of perspective also is another thing that makes a team work. So the third thing here is growth comes from challenges, okay? So if you ever get to the point in life where you feel like you're just the king or the queen or whatever of everything, good for you, okay? Now, I hate to break it to you, but that feeling will not last forever, and many people have come to the demise of their careers, of themselves, et cetera, from the stagnation and complacency that comes from just being the expert of all things in your domain, okay? What a person really needs to do well in life in general, and what a business needs as well, is continuous growth. If you're staying the same, you're probably losing something. If you're not continuing to grow and expand in some shape, way, or form, or at least to shift and transform and renew yourself, your knowledge, to rehash things out, to challenge previously held presuppositions. If you're not doing that, you're probably not going to be growing very quickly. And people who grow quickly and continuously and often they tend to be more sustainable. Your growth is going to come from challenges, okay? What I tell my students at the boot camp that I teach at is that the struggle zone is the zone that is going to help you expand and grow as a person. That does not mean that your whole career needs to be this big antagonizing storyline of drama and failure. But what it does mean is that you need to, anybody really, needs to have a little bit of friction, a little bit of resistance, a little bit of strain involved in the process, because that is actually what stimulates growth. And that's just like a general principle of nature, but certainly it's also true for our minds. And you have to you have to start to like learn to enjoy that. I guess is what I really want to say. It's hard to do it. It takes a lot of practice. But if you can get to this space where you start to think about what you do as like this really fun, challenging puzzle instead of something that brings you stress, you're going to be in a much better place. And those challenges are just a game. It's a video game. Okay, you give me a coding problem. It's a little puzzle, a little game. I don't always win every single game, but I'd rather think of it like that because it's going to be the right mindset to keep going. Okay, so growth comes from challenges. You need them. You need those challenges, and you also need to grow. You need both. Ooh, I got 3 more of these. I'm talking up a storm. It is 21 minutes into our show. We're going to keep going. Okay. Ooh, I just spit. Okay, so I like doing these live streams, by the way. I don't know if I'll ever do like recordings because I don't want to. Okay, that's enough. Okay. How to keep learning while working. Okay. So the way that I think about it and the way that I've seen people who are successful approach this is to think about it as a continuous thing. Okay. Now, in your continuous learning journey, you may benefit from having specific checkpoints. Now, in terms of how those, lay out in your calendar and your timeline, that's up to you. Okay. I would recommend aiming for some type of balance. And here's what I would recommend. 1, set some learning goals. Okay. Now, your learning goals don't need to be really specific. In fact, you may need to learn your goals partially as you go. I would say start off with a higher level vision. Okay, so for example, when I finished my coding bootcamp program back in 2018, my higher level vision was that I wanted to be a cloud engineer. And I figured that it would take me about 2 years or so. 1, to just get over the burnout of being in school for so long. 2, to get acclimated to the job that I actually needed to do on a daily basis. And 3, to start to study and to learn and to prep and everything outside of work to even make this possible, right? So I had a bigger goal in mind, and I left my bigger goal a little bit, actually very open, because I wanted to leave myself a chance to get to it through a number of different various paths, right? So if one path didn't work, so for example, taking a course on Udemy, if that path didn't work, or if it didn't give me everything I needed, I could go and buy the course on edX, or I could maybe even just go buy a book, or I could use YouTube, or I could do a combination of these things as fits into my attention span. The big thing here, however, is that I had a learning goal, and even if I didn't have like a big master plan for how it all fit together, I could set up maybe some smaller structured learning plans that could get me part of the way many, many times over. Okay. So maybe for a couple of months I do one thing, couple more months I do another thing, couple more months I do another thing. And after a while, it goes from being, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know where I'm going, to having a bunch of pieces that may not all be like connected the way you want, but you have enough to where you can start to see the gaps you need to fill in. And that's what I mean when I say like a structured growth. Structure does not mean having it all architected out. It just means like having a structure, so to speak of, and knowing where you can build and where you need to build, and that type of thing. And let me add one more thing to that. The way that I kept my structure and I kept myself organized is no matter how I was choosing to learn, I kept all of my notes, all of my materials in one place, right? So, for example, I might have when I was doing the AWS thing, I learned a little bit about each of the services through one like little learning course I took. I put all the notes there in one place, right? And then in another course I took, I did a bunch of like quizzes, practice quizzes, and then looked up the answers for the ones that I missed on the test. I put those in my notes too, right? So my structure for me ended up being my notes. My notes helped me to kind of see what I had learned and see what I needed to learn, and it was all sort of neatly in one general area. So the second thing here is time boxed explorations. I'm going to use the word spike. Um, so in a spike, SPIKE, in software engineering, in software development, a spike is considered a research project with a deliverable at the end. Okay, so it's not like sitting around on Wikipedia all night, which can be nice, but it's not like that. Okay, a spike really is you going out, finding maybe a tutorial or a walkthrough, or maybe even coming up with a small project for yourself, or even using a get started guide for a new tool or technology you want to try out, something like that. But the main thing is that at the end of all of your musings and wanderings through this thing, you have something that you can show that demonstrates at least some aspect of functionality. So for example, I could do a spike as a beginner to build a server in JavaScript with Express, right? I may know how to build a server using vanilla JavaScript out of the box. Let's face it, who actually does that? But that might be something you already know, but you don't know how to do it with Express, right? So you go and learn how to do that. You make a small example of it, and that is your spike. And to kind of keep it on point with my notes here, time box it, okay? Now, time boxing is not always necessary, but the thing with software is that software tasks and the complexity and the features of a project, for many a people, have a tendency to have what's called scope creep, meaning your project might become bigger and bigger and more complicated than you expected. You might have been trying to do one simple, really small thing, but because you didn't put boundaries on it, it just becomes a big thing. And the next thing you know, you spent 2 weeks working on one project, and you've gotten to the point of diminishing returns. Okay, so time boxing yourself, making sure that your goals are achievable goals, but also make sure that you give yourself some constraints so that if you are tarrying too long, it's not that you should quit or whatever, is that it may be worth it to just simply move on and come back and to revisit, to reframe, to refresh, something like that. I would say a good project should be at least 2 weeks at the max. I mean, at most. You know what I meant. Same difference. At most, I would say 2 weeks at most, unless it's something that you're really, 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 really serious about doing, like a passion project, something you really believe in. But if it's just for the sake of learning a concept or a tool or something like that, 2 weeks, a week, hell, 3 days, that's fine. Those are great time boxes. I personally might veer more towards the 3 day mark if it's something that I just want to have like a nice portfolio piece for one specific area. I would veer more towards that timeline. But for like a really, for a spike shouldn't really be taking you that long. As a beginner, I only say it, 2 weeks because as a beginner, if you're on your own and you ain't got no guidance or no help or anything like that, maybe between you working your day job and your family stuff, maybe that's the amount of time you might need, right? That's reasonable. If you're like a full-time person and you don't have anything else to do, a spike should be like a day or two, to be completely honest with you. But I'm not gonna convey the expectation. I think for the average person who is not doing this as a career and you have other things, other shit to do. Can I cuss on here? You know what I mean? If you got other stuff that you need to be focusing on, I would say like, yeah, give yourself plenty of time. Okay, a week or 2 weeks is fine. You will get faster as you go. And then the third point here, I think this is to me the part where a lot of people kind of slack off on, is the sharing. Um, I almost wanted to say, I almost wanted to do the quote that like old people say, but I'm not going to go down that route in life today. I'll just say this: if your purpose, your goal here is to like get work, if you're trying to get a job, if you need to get a job, an occupation, a career, a vocation, you're trying to use your craft to get employment. Um, having stuff that you've made and actually doing things, that's great. That's perfect. That's awesome. That's wonderful. You get a cookie, okay? You get some Chobani's yogurt, okay? However, that being said, you must share your stuff. Some way, somehow, somewhere, in order for all that other stuff to kind of manifest, right? Now, this is not just important for aggregating attention and attracting opportunity, but when you are in the habit of sharing, not only sharing, but preparing to share, and let me just make a sidebar here, that means having things like readmes, documentation, writing articles, writing blog posts, writing tutorials, writing guides, recording explanations, making diagrams, charts, whatever you need to make to support the work that you spend all your time doing. When you do that stuff, not only does it attract attention and opportunity and serve as like marketing collateral for your personal branding, your job seeking endeavor, but it also demonstrates that you're the kind of person who can bring that similar value to a team, because teams need all those things as well. They do. Yeah, team doesn't just sit around and make features. They have to be able to explain, express information, share things, show people how to use the thing that they just made, the software they just made, right? You're always going to have to need demonstrations. In fact, after every sprint, there's going to be a demo likely on the team that you work on anyways, right? So the point here is get into the habit of making cool stuff under constraints and with some type of research or learning process embedded in the project making phase. And then also at the end of all of that, wrapping it up with some sharing behavior. For me, I like to write, I like to record videos, of course. I like to do explanations of the concept I just learned. That kind of thing is excellent. Find your voice and use it, however. You don't need to be a performer, a griot, a bard, anything like that to do it. Just find your way, okay? But definitely share. I would say that this learning process doesn't all need to happen in any specific sequence or order. Sometimes I like to share as I'm going. I love a good behind the scenes. I love a good work in progress. I love a good status update on a bigger thing. I love that, right? I might do that. I might do the sharing part as I go. I may adjust my goals or even learn my goals after I get started on something, right? Sometimes it's nice to just tinker around and then set some goals. The time boxing thing may or may not happen. Maybe I go into something with an open-ended time, and then as I learn about what I'm doing, maybe I come up with a time box afterwards, right? So the order here doesn't have to happen in this sequence, and you don't also always need all these three different things. But these are things I fall back on. Oh, it's over here. These are things these are things I fall back on when I feel lost, okay? When I feel lost and I'm like, okay, what do I need to do to keep my growth process happening? I try to remember these things here. Okay, now there's a bigger context to all of this, but this will do you well if you need a type of framework here. The last point here is make learning a part of your daily routine. I would recommend that if you're going to go into any sort of knowledge working field, that's where I like to use. I think of this as knowledge working. If you're going into a field that involves a lot of intellection, a lot of strategizing, a lot of architecting, planning, solutioning, thinking about very abstract problems, then you're going to benefit from having a habit and a routine that allows you to continuously do all these things up here in a way that is fun and discreet. Kind of like how when people trick themselves into exercising by disguising it as a fun dance, right? Or maybe even choosing the way that they enjoy the most that's inclined to their nature. I would recommend doing it like that. For me, I know that I like to code and stuff. If I can do it on a stream, maybe listen to some good music, relax, chill. Love to do it at nighttime. I love to learn on the go. Sometimes I'll listen to technical conversations or tutorials, even without watching the video, just as background noise. Like, I find all these like very clever and discreet ways to always be passively learning and growing. And I think that if you can find your approach to doing that, then a lot of this is like a lot less intimidating. One of my big approaches is to focus on gathering energy and inspiration. And then eventually, if I do that enough, I'm going to get hit by some inspiration. And then next thing I know, I'm like knee deep in some random project that I'm really excited about, but that I get to practice all these things for. Okay. So stay inspired. Stay in the loop, stay in the conversation. And just remember, ideas can hit you anywhere, and you should definitely try them. Okay, if you have a weird idea for a project or anything like that, try it out, see if it works, you know? Yeah, that's all I got to say. So yeah, that's my advice. Keep learning and do it on the go. Okay, so now, when you're working, you're learning how to code and do all these things, you're not going to have all of the ability to do everything by yourself. In fact, I would say that a person who is new, brand new, maybe you haven't even gotten your first job yet, this might be the part that is the biggest challenge and obstacle for you. Now, problem solving is a fundamental skill that is necessary for all STEM careers, okay? And a very specific type of problem solving that I would say is structured or a strategic problem solving, okay? This is getting into things like logic, research methodologies, that kind of thing. Now, that might be an area that is not very comfortable for a lot of people. It really just depends on your background, okay? However, here's 3 things you can do. And this is, these are just my take on this. There are a lot of different frameworks. This is just the one that I like. RTA, okay? Research the problem, try to solve it yourself, and then ask for help. And by the time you ask for help, you should be able to bring your attempt of a solution with you when you're doing so, okay? Now, the caveat here is that asking for help these days with the advantage of AI doesn't necessarily need to be a person, although that's what I would recommend because coding is a social endeavor that requires relationship. However, if you do choose to use AI, you still would benefit from having tried to solve the problem yourself because you will be better equipped to write good prompts for whatever system you choose to employ, okay? So, researching, go Google, use YouTube. I think a lot of people these days even use TikTok. However you choose to research, try to do it broadly, and also try to make sure you go to primary sources, okay? So for example, if you're learning about Node JavaScript, go to the actual website. If you can even stand it, try to read and look at the Get Started guide. Look at the documentation. Look at the API documentation. Whatever it is that you're trying to solve, find the most direct source and then go from there. One of my favorite techniques and approaches is even if I'm working with a documentation that feels really dense and it's hard to read, or maybe it's just very boring and poorly written, I will even take that stuff and I will use it as input for an AI system to help me to understand the concept. I may even choose to have AI explain something in the way that it could be explained to a 10th grader or to a high schooler, even though I am a fully grown adult. This is a way of using these systems to help interpret language. And a lot of times it's not that you can't understand the concept. Sometimes it's just the way that it's written. And a lot of knowledge working content is sort of written in a very unnecessarily dense way that it doesn't have to be. But I would say like AI nowadays helps with that. So please use it to your advantage. When you're researching, I think the biggest thing with number one here is if you don't understand the problem you're trying to solve, then you are likely not going to understand the solution, even if you can get it to work. And, in a sense, yes, getting something to work is kind of the point. But if your goal is to grow and you are a bona fide noob, then you really do want to understand the problem, not just the solution or the tinkered solution you got to work, okay? So spend time understanding the problem. Make sure you can accurately describe the problem you're having or the problem you're trying to create a solution for, and make sure you're able to express that in a clear, structured set of sentences. If you can describe the problem and the intention in clear, plain language, it is very likely that you're going to be able to effectively move on to the next step, which is actually trying to solve it. A lot of times what happens is that people get mixed up and they invert these two things. People will get kind of in this frenzy with a half understood solution or idea of what they're trying to do, and then they'll jump in, they'll get lost, and they'll forget that they really didn't have a plan to begin with in the first place. Okay, they really didn't have an understanding to begin with in the first place. I do this a lot as well. I see this in my students a lot. I think that this a lot of times happens to be a anxiety response. It's a response to anxiety and fear that causes us to get kind of in this tizzy. Okay, so if you can slow yourself down, focus on just understanding the problem. You don't need to solve the problem right now. You don't have to solve the problem at this exact moment. And also you probably can't. So try to at least understand it. And if you understand it, you'll be more equipped to also ask for help as well, which is the other point here, okay? So all this needs to work in tandem. I put this in this order for a very good reason, so don't get the order mixed up, at least until you're more advanced, and maybe you can skip these, I guess. There is a way of programming that I believe is more intuition-based, which I think can be a valid way to program, but this is not what I would recommend for a beginner. This process here, however, I think would work for most people who are not at that level, okay? So you want to build problem-solving skills that will be transferable regardless of the domain that you're working in, because from one job to the next, you could be working with very different landscapes in which your skills are being used. But if you have a good process in general for problem solving, then you'll be more flexible to move between these different landscapes of where code is used. Okay, so yeah, fundamentals are everything. Okay, so I believe that this is the last slide here. I should probably put numbers on these in the future, but I guess this is the part that can be a big surprise to people when you're learning on your own. Or even when you're at a boot camp, this part here is not always a big part of the experience for a lot of people, which is the code review. Now, you might be asking, like, what is a code review? A code review is just when you're working on a bigger project, and as a part of this project, in order to have your changes, your updates, your new features, your bug fixes, whatever it is that you've contributed, in order to have all that integrated into the actual project you're creating, someone needs to look at your code, review it, read it, provide feedback, look for vulnerabilities in the way you code, maybe opportunities to optimize the way you've written your code. If there's performance issues with the way you've written something, a code review hopefully is the opportunity for someone to be able to give you the feedback to make your code better in general. Okay. Now, this can be very scary, and a lot of times we identify very heavily with our work, and so people might also have a lot of anxiety around Um, this being a reflection of the quality of them as a person or them as an engineer. It is not. It's not those things. Okay. Think about a code review as help. It is help that is involuntarily baked into the process, but it is nonetheless help. And that is the primary reason it exists. It is not there to be a judgment against you. It is not an indictment. People aren't there to interrogate, the effectiveness of your intellection. Okay, the goal really is just to help, and code reviews oftentimes are made to be a mandatory part of the process because a lot of times people can be sort of like shy and coy about it. So people sometimes have to be forced. Okay, but a code review is meant to help you. Now you can or you can choose to not make this a positive thing for you. I say make it a positive thing because iron sharpens iron. Okay, steel sharpens steel. Okay, so try to embrace this as like a opportunity to grow. Look at this as a positive thing, especially if you get to be on a team of working with senior developers that you really, really respect. You're going to grow so much from just being open and for taking the feedback seriously, from actually making changes, or at least going through the process of having conversations. And even if you don't agree, that can also be very helpful as well. Okay, so this is truly a gift. And by the time you get to the place where you're able to have code reviews, you're in your career. Okay, and as long as you learn how to stay afloat and to use that advice to your advantage, you're going to be good. Because generally when people give you feedback, they're trying to make you better. And you should want that, okay? In your code review, however, I would say you're going to be in a better place if you go into code reviews with a clear idea of what you did and why you did it the way you did it. Okay. Now, that's not saying that you need to defend it with like a bat, and it's not a thing where you have to say this is my way or the highway. It's more so people are going to have questions, and maybe they might even have some assumptions. But if you can tell the story and the thought process behind how you came to a solution, or better yet, even have engineering notes that can convey that, then it's going to allow people to better know how to communicate to you. Also, if they find problems, they will better understand the type of advice that might benefit you better based on what your understanding reveals, okay? So if you can explain your thought process and be generous with sharing that, be willing to engage in the conversation, then you're going to be in a better place. Don't just sit there and be a passive receptor, is what I'm saying, or passive receiver. Like, make it a conversation. It's not a debate, it's not an argument, it's not a fight, but it is nonetheless a conversation where two or more minds come together to really think deeply about whether something is the best solution, and whether or not it meets all the criteria that were asked for as well, okay? And then make sure you ask questions about suggestions. If someone suggests something, make sure you understand what they're suggesting. Make sure you understand why they're suggesting it. And also, it's good to think about alternatives. If it wasn't done this way, how could it be done elsewise? Okay. A lot of times, if there's areas of the recommendation that you don't understand, that means you need to ask questions. Okay. Especially if you're a noob. If you don't ask questions, you're only hurting yourself. And also, people aren't going to trust you as much because they're going to see that you're a beginner, you're not asking questions, and that in combination with mistakes, that's not a good look, okay? So you want to be a beginner who makes mistakes, but one who makes mistakes and asks questions so that you can improve, not one who just makes mistakes and just sits there with a blank stare, okay? Don't be that person, okay? So just remember, the code review is not about you as a person, it's about the code, and the role you play is you're just receiving help. That's really what it's about, okay? On a team, everybody wants the software to be the best software it can be. Everybody wants the goal of the sprint to be as successful as possible, and the feedback is how you get there, okay? So it's not about you, okay? So get that feedback. You're going to grow from it. It's going to make you a better developer. Okay. So that's pretty much all I got for you today. Thanks for coming by the stream. Just come back to my channel. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. I'm still working on the channel, still working on the visuals and stuff, but I wanted to get on here and do a quick little video. And I will catch you later, and I'll catch you right here in the same place. So peace, pause, applesauce.